Hi, you're watching Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone, and over the last week or so, basically whenever I hit the treadmill, I have been working my way through the brand new Netflix documentary series about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, which, strangely enough, is called The Disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Now, there's probably not a person alive today who doesn't know at least something about this case or has not actually heard the name Madeleine McCann. It was just such a high-profile case. Back in 2007, you've got this 3-year-old British girl who's on holiday with her family. She disappears from the villa where they are staying, and basically no one who's heard from, seen of, or knows anything about this. The crime remains unsolved, and it's still this big question: what actually happened to Madeleine McCann? Was she kidnapped? Is she dead? Were the parents involved? Was someone else involved? Was it an accident? Did they cover up the accident? All these questions have been swirling around this case for that long. And this documentary, for a true crime documentary, I think is actually pretty well crafted. Often true crime documentaries really frustrate me because what they tend to do is they actually aren't so much documentaries as they are advocacy pieces, and they're really about trying to present a case. And usually what happens when you get series like this that do that is they tend to selectively present evidence, or they cherry pick it, or they present it in such a way as to favour a particular conclusion, but they don't put all of the facts on the table. This documentary is not like that. It actually just puts everything out there, whether it's flattering or unflattering to any of the parties involved. It just puts all of the information on the table and gives you this complete overall timeline about what happened. Now, I'm someone who was familiar with this case and this crime and thought I knew all about it, but I actually learned things watching this documentary. And interestingly enough, one of the big complaints, there's two major complaints I've seen online from people who have watched this documentary and reviewed it. Number one is people are saying, well, it didn't tell me anything new. There was no new evidence presented. And the other thing was people who were saying it just put all the information out there, and I was hoping for something a bit more definitive. And I actually think that that's a positive in this case, because like I said, it's not your typical true crime type documentary series that just quickly devolves into an advocacy piece. It actually just fairly presents everything. And towards the end, it's clearly heading in one direction, or it seems to be favouring a particular outcome. That's normal in a situation like this. But it's not heavy-handed, and as I said, it doesn't selectively cherry-pick evidence. It just puts all the information on the table, and you end up with largely a balanced presentation of all the ins and outs of the case, the evidence, and both for and against, and all the parties involved and all the accusations that have swirled around regarding this case. But basically, by the end of this documentary series, I have 6 questions that I've been thinking about a lot since I finished the last episode. Why didn't the McCanns participate in the documentary? And I don't understand this, because the documentary is not unfavourable towards them. It just puts all the evidence out there. Interestingly enough, close friends of theirs did participate, and they're interviewed, and they appear in, I think, every episode of this documentary, speaking very favourably about the McCanns. And the documentary does not in any way denigrate them. It doesn't in any way accuse them of anything. It puts all the information out on the table, including accusations that have been levelled against them by others, and evidence that wasn't necessarily particularly favourable to their claim that this was a kidnapping. But it doesn't seek to victimise, to denigrate, to vilify them at all. So I'm kind of surprised that they didn't participate. Now, one of the things I've read in response, and I don't know how true this is because, the media being what the media is, but several of the articles I've read about this seem to indicate that the McCanns chose not to participate because they felt it wouldn't help actually advance the case, and it wouldn't help find their daughter. But I kind of find that a little bit strange, because they have involved themselves in some very intensive, high-profile and wide-ranging PR efforts over the years since the disappearance. And it seems to me also that this documentary would be a help, because it's putting their case before the public again to a wide global audience, which surely is an advantage to them. So I'm just a little bit surprised by that. And as I said, at the end of the documentary series, I was left just questioning why they chose not to be involved in this series. The second question I have is this, and this is about the crime itself. Why would the parents do all of this, go to all of these lengths, if they were involved? It seems to me that this is a question that sort of counts against the accusation that they were the perpetrators of this crime, that they've either accidentally caused the death of their daughter and then they've tried to cover it up, or they've deliberately caused the death and then tried to cover it up. It just seems to me that these lengths that they've gone to now afterwards are quite extreme. And that question to me does count against the suggestion that they've actually been involved in this crime themselves. They're responsible for it. However, in response to that, I'd imagine people would say, well, isn't it also equally possible that once the lie took off, if this is a lie, once the lie took off and the machine just basically grew and grew and grew, it effectively consumed them. And what's the only alternative that they've got now? And that's to carry on and to keep this beast alive, because the only other alternative would be to actually have your reputations completely destroyed and you'd be going to prison for the crime. And so it seems that the only way to avoid that would be to keep, if this is a lie, to keep the lie going. But it does seem strange that parents would go to all of these lengths and that they would keep this, like both of them. I can understand one person, but both of them, and then even sort of friends of theirs around. As far as I'm aware, no close friends have raised doubts about the innocence of the McCanns. So I think that to me is an important question that's a big and serious question that sort of counts against the theory that maybe they were involved. If the parents did do this, where is the body? What happened to the body? Because it seems to me that if the parents have actually done this, then they would have had to have disposed of the body at some point, or organised for the body to be disposed of. And it seems that given all the publicity and the journalistic focus that was on this case, the window for doing that would have been very limited. But I think it's an important question. Where did the body end up? Why has the body not been found all of this time? Now, they were at a coastal resort town, so it's quite possible that, I guess disposing of it in the sea could have been a way that this was done if they were involved in the crime. But there's still big questions about when exactly they would have done this and how they would have got away with this with no one actually seeing them do that. And interestingly enough, the documentary, because the documentary is very fair and balanced, and it doesn't get into this territory of trying to present a hypothesis about who did it and how they would have committed the crime and just plucking all sorts of information out of the air to try and craft a story or a narrative about how this crime was committed. It doesn't really explore those questions about how possibly someone could have actually done this if the McCanns themselves were involved. Which, as I said, is a positive about this documentary. But to me, that question also is a big and important question. If they did do this, what the heck did they do with the body? Where is the body? What happened to the body? What motive would the members of the McCann party, that dinner party, have for actually lying? Because there's this very brief idea, or it's this brief, what you might call a brief suggestion that's introduced into the documentary, that perhaps the dinner party were not telling the truth when they claimed that they were getting up every 20 minutes or so to check on the children, or that they had line of sight. Because the dinner party, remember, were actually at a restaurant. They were not in the same villa. They were not even in the same building where Madeleine McCann was, where the children were when this crime took place, or when the disappearance happened. So they claimed they had line of sight from the restaurant where they were eating. They claimed they were getting up every 20 minutes or so to go and check on the children. Now, those two things were challenged in this documentary. It's very brief, but they were challenged in this documentary. But that raises the question, well, what possible motive would all of those people have for lying? Because it's one thing to have one person commit a crime and cover it up, or a couple of people, particularly a husband and wife, but it seems to me that you're really getting into sort of questionable territory to suggest that they would all willingly go along with lying. Surely, if they knew that the truth wasn't being told, that would tell them that in actual fact their friends, the McCanns, were involved in this crime. And I think most people you'd have to be, I think, a particularly special kind of evil person to keep that covered up just because you were friends with someone. It seems to me that when you're talking about a crime involving a child, that people, even friends of other people, would actually say, well, no, they weren't telling the truth, or no, we didn't go and check on them. And it just seems strange why they would, what motive would they have for lying? And basically the fact that they don't really have a strong motivation to lie tends to disprove the theory that some people were saying, and which was put out there in this documentary, that maybe they hadn't told the truth, unless they just feel guilty. Maybe, I guess the possible response to that is that maybe they didn't tell the truth, they didn't have line of sight, they weren't actually checking every 20 minutes, they felt guilty about that. They didn't want to admit to the world that they had failed in their duty of care. Maybe they had a few too many drinks. They didn't want to look like they were negligent, and their negligence had led to the disappearance or the kidnapping of a young girl, or to a crime being perpetrated against her. So they just told a lie in order to save their own reputations. But to me, it just seems strange that they wouldn't have actually come out. As far as I'm aware, they haven't come out and said, no, in actual fact, the McCanns are not telling the truth here about the timeline and what went on. Question number 5 I have is this, and to me, I guess this is a haunting question. If Madeleine McCann was the victim of a kidnapping, would she even know who she actually is today? Assuming she's still alive and the victim of a kidnapping, would she even know? She'd be about 15 years of age now. Would she have memories of her younger self, her former life before the kidnapping? Is it possible that even if she did have those memories when she was kidnapped, that she could have been brainwashed out of those memories through just a series of repetitive lies being told to her, and effectively, as a young child, becoming convinced that her former life wasn't real? If she is, she's 15, but she has those memories from when she was a 3-year-old, and she actually does remember parts of her former life. Why hasn't she come forward? Now, that's a haunting question, because if she was the victim of kidnapping and she does remember her former life and enough to actually know, hey, this could be me, the fact that she hasn't come forward would indicate that one of two things: that either she is no longer alive, or number 2, that she's not able to. She's not in a position where she can alert anyone. There's no one to actually tell that she is the victim of this crime, and here she is, please someone come and get me. And so that's quite a haunting question to actually think about, the possibility that particularly if she has no memory of her former life, that there is an older Madeleine McCann out there who has been the victim of a kidnapping but has no idea who she actually is. She is now living her life as someone, she's living a lie basically, and has no concept at all about who she is. And that's quite haunting, because you think about the prospect of what that could mean, that her parents may never ever see her again, and she may never ever know, ever in her lifetime, that she actually was this young girl who was kidnapped. She actually really is Madeleine McCann, and these people are her real parents. And question number 6, and this for me is the most important question of all, and this is about the most damning piece of evidence that was raised in this documentary. But interestingly enough, the documentary never ever goes back and satisfyingly answers or gives answers to this question. And this is, as I said, the most important question of all for me is this. Number 6, what about the sniffer dogs and the evidence that they found? So you have these 2 sniffer dogs, the blood sniffer and the cadaver sniffer dog. So the cadaver sniffer dog sniffs out where dead bodies have been present or where someone has handled a corpse. The blood sniffer dog detects where blood has been, or the presence of blood, even if it's not visible and obvious. Now, we are told in the documentary series that these dogs, these forensic dogs, they do not fail. But they obviously can't be, and the documentary is very fair about this, they can't be used as expert witnesses in court because they're not persons. They have no personal capabilities. They cannot reason, and they cannot tell us what their reasoning is and how they evaluated the evidence. They are just responding based on instinct, so they can't be used as witnesses to put forward a proposition. The documentary is very sort of clear and, as I said, very balanced in this regard. However, we are also told that they don't fail, that they don't accidentally pick up rotting fruit or other things and mistake them. And not once does the documentary ever challenge that claim. No one puts forward evidence. No one raises questions and says, well, in actual fact, these dogs fail in 20% of the cases, or, we've tested these dogs and in actual fact, they did pick up rotten fruit, or they actually mistook perfume for the scent of a dead human body. The reliability of the dogs is never questioned in any major or serious way in this documentary. The evidence is presented. And what those sniffer dogs found was that there was evidence of a dead body in the actual villa itself, where she disappeared from, in the rental car that the family had, and on family clothing. And the blood sniffer dog also reacted positively as well and found blood evidence, or indicated there was blood evidence there. This is kind of important, and actually it is very damning evidence, and it clearly would indicate that, it's probably more likely than not that the parents were actually involved in this crime. Because the other alternative is that the kidnapper ended the life of Madeleine McCann in that villa and then took the body away, which is kind of strange, but it is still possible. But either way, that evidence is actually really crucial, I think, and very, very damning, particularly in regards to the parents. But the documentary never ever challenges that. And in fact, it presents it, puts it out there. It is an important piece of evidence. And then it's sort of just over the ensuing sort of episodes, it just basically moves away from it and never revisits it. And to me, that leaves a huge and glaring question unanswered. What are we supposed to make of that evidence? Because after watching this documentary, the impression, or I guess the facts as they're put to us, are that these dogs don't make mistakes. But they can't be used in court for obvious reasons, because they're not persons, they're animals. However, their reliability apparently is pretty darn good. So why? Now, I know some people have put forward in the documentary, they do talk about this, well, why would there be evidence of the body and blood in a rental car that was rented 25 days after, I think it was about 25 days after the actual crime was committed. So several weeks after the disappearance was when they rented that car. Why would the evidence be in that car? That seems to be questionable, because would they have really waited that long to dispose of a body if the parents were involved? How would they have disposed of it with all of the scrutiny they were under? That seems like a pretty bold thing to do, and it seems actually highly unlikely that anyone would do that. And I agree, unless you'd have to be absolutely desperate to do that. But it does, it's still possible, but it sort of seems highly unlikely, given all the scrutiny and everything else, that you would actually do that. However, we also know from this documentary that basically simple transfer can cause a response from these dogs. So, in the case of the clothing, if you're wearing the clothing and you've been handling a corpse, and you effectively, that scent is transferred to that clothing. And so it's quite conceivable that that's how you end up. You have blood evidence transferred or the scent of a corpse, because people have been in that vehicle who have handled the corpse, or clothing, etc., or items that have been close to the body have been in that car. So it seems to me that is a possible response to that question. That is a huge, that question number 6 though is huge. The documentary never ever, it just sort of puts it out there. And to me that's a really, really damning piece of evidence that has not been satisfactorily answered for my way, just reasoning my way through this case and thinking about it. It has not been satisfactorily answered at all. So would I recommend this documentary series? Well, yeah, I would. Even if you're someone who knows all about this case. As I said, I watched it and I learnt new information. I thought I knew everything about it, but in actual fact, I didn't know everything about it. And it's a very fair presentation, largely unbiased presentation of all the evidence, all the timeline of the crime and what's happened subsequently, and all of the various ins and outs. And as I said, I learnt things along the way that I hadn't known before. And for that reason alone, it's worth sort of, if you want to understand this case deeply, or you're someone who perhaps has never even heard about this case, this is definitely worth watching. If you're someone who's looking for a gotcha moment or some sort of, piece that's going to clearly tell you what happened, it's going to present the evidence, or it's going to say, hey, we've got this brand new piece of evidence that no one's ever seen before, here it is. This is not what this documentary series is. And as I said, that actually counts in its favour. I think that's a good thing. It's a balanced presentation of facts. It's not sensationalistic in that regard. So if you're looking for sensationalism and some sort of gotcha moment and some sort of big evidence reveal, or even people trying to construct how they think the crime happened in whatever direction, that's not what this is. The interesting thing about this documentary series for me is, and I think it's another positive, is that it's really as much an expose by the end of the documentary about the conduct of the mainstream media as it actually is about the crime itself. Because in this case, the way the media conducted themselves was truly reprehensible. And, you've got these situations where they're just repeating lies, they're putting unconfirmed information out there. There was a hearing actually in the UK about this case and the way that the media conducted themselves, and they present and they talk about, in this documentary series, towards the end, they talk about that hearing and this exploration of how the media conduct themselves, because it's a pretty glaring sort of indictment about how the mainstream media works in this situation. And for me, it's really fascinating. This is a space I work in. Those of you who watch my channel regularly know that I have a background in media and communications and media training and consultancy for organisations and individuals. And so I see this world up close and personal. And it really, this documentary sort of just pulls back the curtain for perhaps people who aren't used to seeing this world in this way. And so I think that's a good thing. And what you realise if you watch the documentary is you realise, in actual fact, the media end up creating their own juggernaut, the demand for information and the public interest and the public needs to know. And then they use the juggernaut that they have created as a justification for why they keep rushing information and why they don't fact check like they should. So it's a vicious circle. They create the demand and then they use the demand that they have created as an excuse for why they need to actually fulfill the demand, and an excuse and a justification for why they don't need to actually fact check properly and why they are rushing things. And just putting any old information out there without actually properly verifying it, regardless of the fact that this is so serious. And we're talking about implicating parents, we're talking about the possibility of hindering the solving of a crime involving a young girl, so it's pretty serious stuff. But this documentary sort of really lays bare basically aspects of the modern mainstream media, which are now really at crisis point, and why they're such a problem in regards to the information that we're receiving in society in general, and in particular about this particular case. The other thing that's interesting to me about this documentary is the involvement of PR companies. And for those who don't know, public relations companies, they're not in the business of fact-finding or truth-telling. That is not the role of a PR company. I know this because I have had experience working in this space. And the role of a PR company is not to find the facts and present the facts. They're not an investigatory thing. The role of a PR company is not to tell the truth. The role of a PR company is to actually ensure that the public have a good image, a good impression about a person or a group or a thing. Their job is to make the public think favourably, or to be more favourable towards a particular person or group of people or a particular thing. And so PR companies are hired to find the most effective way to actually communicate to the public and get them on board with your cause, with who you are. Now, if the truth happens to be beneficial to that, great. They find ways, the most effective ways, to communicate those truths. But they are not primarily there to serve the truth. They're not primarily there to find facts. Those things are secondary to simply doing the job of making sure that you have a good image in public. Now, I understand why the parents would want to use a PR company. I get it. As I said, I've have experience in this space, and I understand how a PR company would be invaluable if you're trying to get the public to focus on finding your daughter and you're desperate to do anything you can to actually get the focus shifted onto trying to solve the crime and trying to keep the memory of your daughter alive so you can actually have justice for your daughter. So it would make sense. But as the documentary wears on, you realise, you know what? The involvement of PR companies in this particular case has been so much that this becomes a point of jeopardy or a thing that actually begins to hinder and raise serious questions about, well, how much are we actually being told here now that's the truth? And how much of this is just a PR company that has advised people what to say and what not to say? And it's a very interesting question that starts to dawn on you the more you find out about this case and sort of the documentary series as it progresses. I think for me, at the end of the day, there's lots of opinions floating around, lots of speculation. We've all got various speculations and opinions and ideas about this case, but those things are irrelevant. What we really need here is the truth. Why do we need the truth? For the sake of justice for Madeleine McCann. My hope is, as I said, that this documentary might just get us that little bit closer. But at the end of the day, this is conceivably a crime that might never, ever be solved. That's also a possibility. We just don't know. But if this documentary gets us a little closer to solving that crime, then that's a really good thing. And overall, as I said, I would recommend this as a very balanced, a very not particularly biased and certainly not sensationalistic presentation of this case that is actually well crafted, it's beautifully made, and it just puts all of the facts, the whole timeline on the table for you, largely to make up your own mind about. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please consider financially supporting the channel. The links for how you can do that are found in the video description below. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Left Foot Media.